So if you were worried about the US economy, you were worried about prices skyrocketing, you were worried about our supply chain having more and more disruptions, well, good news, a deal has been struck. And so as of right now, these things are likely not going to happen. Now, I want to talk about what actually went down just this morning, because as of this morning, the railroads and the workers' unions, they've actually reached a tentative labor agreement that will avert any worker strike. That is the good news. Now, this is big. This is a huge win for our U.S. economy. It's a huge win for workers. It's a huge win for Democrats and President Biden as well. So I want to break down what's in this new labor agreement, why this is potentially, it could cause some issues in the future. But again, what we're going to see in the future is much better than what we could have seen tomorrow if there was a worker strike. So I will address that in today's video. Now, I also want to talk about what is potentially in this agreement, because according to reports, this is how the agreement is going to break down. Keep in mind, it's still early. We don't have all the details just yet, but we have a pretty good understanding of what's going to be in here. And keep this in mind. When we see wage increases for rail workers, what you need to keep in mind is that is likely to raise prices when it comes to shipping. Okay? So, and I know a lot of people have been saying, well, why don't we just give them what they want? Well, that is pretty much what happened. But the issue there is if we give people an increase in their wages, it's going to increase costs, all right? So here's what's actually in this. Here are the new changes to the labor agreement. First, we have a 24% pay increase. This is going to be paid out over 5 years, but it started in 2020 and it will go through 2024. So there's going to be an immediate payout on average of about $11,000 upon ratification of this labor agreement. We also know workers will receive additional paid days off. We don't know how many, but we do know that was the big sticking point, is that they wanted to have additional paid days off, which now they get, but this also allows the unions to revisit the attendance policies in the future. And again, this is a big deal because everybody was saying that they want to improve their quality of life. The workers needed some type of agreement that yes, it would be about their quality of life, not just working more hours and getting paid more, but having days off. That was the big thing. So this is a huge, huge win. Okay, this tentative deal is huge. And I say this because our supply chain has already been temporarily disrupted. And it was very disrupted due to the potential strike. The actual strike would have sent the U.S. pretty much into complete chaos. Now, we learned just this week that fertilizer has been pulled from rail cars since Monday. They pretty much locked this away. We know as of this morning, Amtrak, they were scheduled to cancel all long-haul trains. However, they're working to try to get that up and running again so that customers are not being burdened by a cancellation. We know coal was going to sit idle as of Friday morning. The food industry would have been hit extremely hard. But again, this is good news that we have struck a deal. Now, let's talk about this. If we go back and we look at what these labor agreement changes are going to be, a 24% pay increase over 5 years, starting from 2020. What we know is that railroads, they can't go and charge their customers more money because now they have to pay for what was worked 2 years ago. That's not going to happen. Okay? So these carriers are going to have to increase their prices. So what does this mean? Well, what travels by rail? We know coal travels by rail, so that means coal is likely to increase in price. Now again, it's not going to be a 200% increase, but we're going to see an increase in price. We're also going to see things like lumber increase in price. We're going to see things like wheat, flour, corn. right? Corn syrup, all these things are going to increase in price. Chlorine will increase in price. So don't think that, all right, the labor agreement has been struck. Like, it's good to go, and we're just gonna skip by and nothing's gonna be done. There's gonna be no changes. There will be changes. We are going to see price increases. Here's the other thing. Workers will receive additional paid days off. Now, if we see, and again, we don't know how many paid days off. Let's say it's 2. It's not going to be a huge deal. Now, if they get 2 weeks paid of additional vacation, well, let's say a full 14 days, or let's say just 10 days. That's going to be fairly significant, because we are already seeing worker shortages, so that would just mean there'd be less people working, which would mean it would probably be slower to get items shipped. So that's kind of what we're seeing at that point. Now, what does this actually mean for President Biden and Democrats? Well, first off, this was a huge win for President Biden himself. This was also a huge win for Democrats. And I say this because if a strike were to happen, this would have been disaster for their plans to remain in control of the House and the Senate after the midterm elections. Well, even before this deal was actually agreed to, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, he said privately that he expects Democrats to lose the majority in the House this year. He also gave Democrats a 60% chance of holding the Senate. So he does believe that, yes, they are going to lose the House. They will not have the House, and there's a chance that they don't hold the Senate. A smaller chance, but still a chance. So that's not good news when the Senate Majority Leader, who is a Democrat, is saying that, yeah, he anticipates that Democrats are going to lose the House, and they got a chance of losing the Senate as well. But again, it all comes down to what is currently being discussed, the bills that have been passed, how Democrats can position themselves in a way to let the American people know that, yes, we are the right people for the job. So we will see what happens come November 8th. That is when the midterm elections actually are. But let's talk about the next thing. Okay, we averted one disaster. Now let's talk about the next thing that Congress must do. And Congress must move into the government funding bill. They must get this done. They got to get it done by the end of September. We got like 15 days. The only problem right now is that Senator Joe Manchin, he actually thought he was going to get a permitting bill, a permitting reform included into this bill. Because according to reports, he was actually promised by President Biden himself and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer that he would get this into the next bill. However, according to Nancy Pelosi, she says she didn't plan on giving Senator Joe Manchin any special treatment just because he came on board and helped Democrats pass the Inflation Reduction Act. So what I can tell you is Democrats are still worried about what they could potentially get done over the next month and a half. Okay? Pretty much before the midterm elections. But here's the truth. Right now, the expectation is this. All bills, all discussions are pretty much going to be tabled except for the government funding bill. That's the one thing that they need to pass. That's the one thing that they need to pass. Well, here's what you need to know about that. That's the bill that they're all looking at, but there's going to be other things added on top of it. For example, additional support for Ukraine. That is still being discussed. There's still billions of dollars for COVID, for U.S. and international. That's still being discussed by Democrats. Republicans are absolutely shutting this down, but Democrats are still trying to get it through. So what we know is that as of right now, there's likely not going to be a huge government funding bill. Okay? It will most likely be a CR, or a continuing resolution, which means that they're going to take the previous year's funding, they're just going to roll it right over into the next year, and that's how they're going to move forward. Well, President Biden's been doing this for a couple years now, so I don't think it's going to be a huge deal, but he wants to get some of his priorities included, and this is why Democrats are pushing so hard to figure out how they can get it done. So we will see what happens moving forward, but the good news out today is that we have a deal from the railroad workers and the unions, okay? From the carriers. We have that agreement, which means that there will be no strike come tomorrow. So that's the good news. As always, as I know more, I promise, I'll come back on and share all latest news and updates. Again, just want to thank you guys for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys on the next one.